Today on Upfront, a revelation from a now-closed secret probe. Governor Walker was the target of a criminal investigation. Next, the timing of this disclosure and others. And should all Doe documents be released? My guest is Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel watchdog columnist Dan Bice. Then, new emission limits on power plants and the effect on jobs and the environment in Wisconsin. And the reviews are in. How Scott Walker did in his first presidential primary debate and how his campaign is spinning it.
Covering the issues important to Wisconsin. This is Up Front with Mike Goucher.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to Up Front. The John Doe probe may be over, but it's still making headlines. Last week, WisPolitics broke the story that Governor Walker was the target of a criminal investigation over bid rigging suspicions. It dated back to Walker's time as Milwaukee County Executive. The WisPolitics report came on the heels of another story, this one by the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel's Dan Bice, who reported on the release of an audio tape from a raid on the home of former Walker aide Cindy Archer. Both of those stories came to light as the result of a lawsuit. Archer is now suing Milwaukee County District Attorney John Chisholm. She says her constitutional rights were violated. Walker was never charged with any crimes, and his campaign says the disclosures and their timing are politically motivated. We're talking more about all of this now with Dan Bice, watchdog columnist for the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. It's good to have you back on the program.
Good to be here.
Well, let's deal with this timing issue. First of all, the Walker folks, conservatives, say they're trying to rain on Scott Walker's parade. He's about to go national in this big debate, and all of this stuff comes out right now. Why now?
Sure, and it's amazing the timing. And there was another lawsuit last year in which that led to a lot of material being released during the election, and they were saying the same thing. But it's all tied to these lawsuits. People who were targets of this investigation didn't like how it went, and now that it's closed, they're pushing back, and they've filed lawsuits, and the prosecutors are responding to the allegations in the lawsuits, and they've convinced the John Doe judge to release a number of records. In this case, this week they had the release of the target information and the audio from the raid at Cindy Archer's house.
Are you surprised? You've been following this story for years now. Are you surprised that the judge is releasing this kind of information?
There's really no precedent on what you can or can't release because, you know, first John Doe investigations are generally secret, so we don't hear about most of them. I am a little surprised. This is, I think, the third or fourth time Judge Nettesheim, who oversaw the John Doe, has released information. I'm not aware of any instance where he's not released information. And it would be interesting to see the entire file because up until this point, we've had the people who were the targets of the John Doe spinning and giving their version of events, and the prosecutors who've been mainly quiet outside of what they've filed in court.
You think all the documents, you tweeted this past week, you think all the documents in the Doe investigation should be released. And what about the secrecy that's been promised to people who are not going to be charged, were not charged in this? What about that?
I think the thing is, it's a little bit different because we're talking about an investigation that had a guy who's running for president at the center of it. So this isn't just another John Doe investigation. So I think, you know, for instance, on these raids, so far we had the version of events by the people who were the targets, and they gave these accounts in which the agents came in, you know, did massive damage to their house. Terrifying, yeah. And when the audio came out this week, and I'm listening to it, it didn't sound anything like that. But we had no way of knowing whose version of events was correct. And in addition to that, we found out this week that they drafted criminal complaints against Cindy Archer and at least 2 other individuals. Was Scott Walker one of them? We don't know. And if these complaints were drafted, I would be very interested in seeing what those complaints actually say.
When you look at these documents, do we know why the governor was not charged in this, or the then county executive? That's when these actions were allegedly occurring. Based on what we've seen, you have somebody from the DA's office saying, we think there's probable cause there.
We can make guesses. We can make inferences. You know, I first wrote about this John Doe in August of 2010, so this has been a long, ongoing process. He sat down and met with them in March of 2012 for a lengthy all-day discussion with the prosecutors. And from what I understand, there was a decision in around May of 2012, right before the recall election, the prosecutor's office trying to decide, should we charge or should we not? And a decision was made not to charge. We don't know what the rationale was. I've been told it divided the office pretty severely because people had different opinions about whether they should charge or not. One of the reasons I think they didn't charge is the matter they were looking at. It was a lease deal that would have benefited the client of Scott Walker's treasure. That client actually didn't end up getting the contract. Had they gotten the contract, it would have probably been a slam dunk case, and they would have filed charges. But that didn't happen.
Give me your sense of the reaction to these stories and the kind of reaction that's generated when you do a story, for example, on the audio tape of that raid. You said it seemed to conflict with the story that's been told by some of the people who've had their homes raided. And yet the blowback was fierce. Conservatives said, no, it actually provides evidence that what she said was true. It does show how polarizing this issue is.
It was actually an evolving response, because the immediate response was, well, she didn't remember all of the details the way she should have. And Right Wisconsin wrote a piece saying that the tone of the agents didn't match what Cindy had told the National Review. She had done a story with the National Review in April in which she talked about this terrifying experience where she was afraid they were going to shoot her dogs or whatever. As I said, when I first listened to the tape, I was surprised at how mannerly and calm everything was and how polite. But the blowback is that the version of events that she gave to the National Review and that's listed in her civil complaint matches the audio exactly. And I just don't see it, but I guess with enough work you can say that there are details that match here and there and put it together in that way.
Does any of this have any impact on Scott Walker's presidential ambitions?
Right now, I don't think so. But the thing is, the prosecutors hold all the cards. We don't know what else they have that they haven't released.
Dan Bice is the watchdog columnist for the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. It's good to have you back on the program.
It's good to be here.
You bet. Later on up front, Scott Walker's campaign trying to shape the narrative on the first GOP debate that was held Thursday night. But first, new emissions limits for power plants. We'll ask how it affects Wisconsin. That's when Up Front continues.
Up Front with Mike Goucher, brought to you by the American Transmission Company and the Wisconsin Corn Growers Association.